Wow, a lot of you seem to have really loved the first Sonic redesign video. I'm really glad and excited to make this a mainstay of the channel, as I really love to draw and discuss with you all in the comments about certain design details and topics from the Sonic franchise. So we're going to be doing the same for this video. However, for those of you that are new and are wondering why I'm doing this in the first place, or what my thought process is for how I came up with these and future designs going forward, I would highly recommend watching the first video. But in short, the Sonic models Sega have been using as of late have been pretty lackluster, to say the least. So I'm here to give some suggestions on what they can improve for the models to feel a bit more lively. A couple of things I want to mention before we start is that I saw some comments from the last video saying how these are basically the same designs as the ones we have now, or you didn't change anything, this is the same as designs we've gone before. And to that I say, that's kind of the point. Like I said in the last video, my goal was to never reinvent or drastically change the characters, because that's how we get designs like Boom or the first movie design. Once you start putting pointless additions to the point where you can't even recognize it's the same character just for the sake of it being different or unique, then that's when I think you've failed at redesigning a character. I take what I like or what works from other designs I've seen in previous games and roll it all into one cohesive and uniform design. I guess what might have led people to saying this is that since I'm doing this all in a 2D art style, it could be harder to differentiate what I mean. If I was able to, I'd love to make these into actual 3D models so it would be easier to show what I'm trying to do different when comparing it to the models we have now. But since I lack the ability to do that, I hope you can at least imagine how my designs would look in 3D and visualize how different they would be. Another thing I'd like to mention is that if you like the models we have now, then more power to you. Just because I don't really care for them doesn't mean that I don't think any less of people that do. Again, like I said in the last video, they are technically decent models. I'd even go as far as to say that they're actually pretty good. They just have a lot of little design quirks that I don't like, and feel like those aspects really hold the characters back from otherwise reaching peak appeal. Would I love Sega to fix the issues I have with them? Yes, of course. Do I think they're going to? No. They're a big company, and I feel like they have more important things to do rather than to listen to some rando on the internet bitching on what shade of blue Sonic should be. They're going to most likely keep using these models for a while, just so they can stay consistent and worry about the more important things like gameplay and story. Just, for God's sake, please fix the animations and expressions. This series is just a fun little exercise and a what if scenario if I were to be in charge of how these characters looked and how they would be portrayed. With that all out of the way, last time I asked who you would like to see redesigned, so I picked the characters that seemed to be the most popular, that being Shadow, Rouge, Eggman, and Metal Sonic. Starting off with the ultimate edgelord himself, Shadow. Much like Sonic, Shadow has those same annoying little design quirks that I just want. That being, the limbs are too lanky, hands are too big, the way his eyes go into his muzzle is weird, lack of eyebrows, and his ears curve into his head instead of around it. So I try to fix a lot of those issues like I did with Sonic. Therefore, I made his proportions as a middle ground between modern and classic. He's a lot more stout, so it's more believable that he can curl into a ball. His eyes flow into his muzzle better, as well as having bigger and more pronounced eyebrows and an eyebrow ridge. Speaking of eyebrows, you know Sega, he doesn't have to be mad all the time. His eyebrows are modeled stuck in this angry expression, which I get it's a big part of his character in that he's serious and stern, but it just looks awkward for when he's doing other expressions like being worried or surprised. It's the same with Super Sonic 2, like the minute Sonic goes super, his eyes now have this point at the corner, like he can't emote how his eyes looked in his regular form. I don't know, it's just something weird I've noticed that I haven't heard anyone else talk about. Like, is it really that difficult to make a facial rig for these characters? I don't know. Anyways, back to Shadow. His spikes are also curved more, rather than it being bent in the middle like how it's interpreted in some of the 2D artwork, or super thin and stretched out like the 3D model. I also made his chest fur bigger and more bushy, I guess, to where it's in his face almost. I hate how on the 3D model it looks so small. Like sometimes it looks like a texture they just slapped on the model when it should stand apart from it. Sometimes you can't even see it's there. I also made his gloves a little different by giving them padding like you'd see on some MMA gloves, or like what Ryu wears in Street Fighter, since he's a little more combat focused than Sonic. His shoes are a little more sleek on the bottom with it flowing into his sole better, and I also gave him this little bar on the top of his shoes. I thought this was cool as it makes his jet shoes look a little more high tech and can serve as a little gauge on how much fuel he has in his shoes, with it depleting the more he uses them. I thought that would make it a little more clear on that he's fast because of his jet shoes, which was confirmed by the comics by the way, and it could lead to a lot more risky scenarios on how he has to conserve his fuel for either speed or other situations like combat, or maybe he can even hover with them. But yeah, that's Shadow. I wanted to fix up some of the problems he had like with Sonic, but I also wanted to highlight what makes him stand apart, like his combat. Next, we got the jewel-loving secret agent, Rouge the Bat. First off, you could see I made a pretty noticeable change, that being her ears. I made them have this little curve on the top, so they're more bat-like. Alright, fine, I'll talk about her weird bat cleavage. I gave her a full-on spy jumpsuit. I really like the idea of when they introduced it in Sonic Prime because it made her appear less of a hooker. God, that feels so uncomfortable when talking about anthropomorphized animals. And it made her feel more of what she actually is, that being a spy. However, what I didn't really care for is that it has a severe case of the MCU costume design philosophy, that being they added a shit ton of lines that feels needlessly complicated, and they downplayed the whole heart theme her old suit had. Like, it went from being this cool chest piece to this little heart-shaped gem that's really hard to tell what it is from a distance. So I kept that aspect from her original design, as well as the gloves and boots. I also gave her a utility belt, as it leans more towards her being a secret agent, with it keeping things such as bombs, lockpicks, or any other spy gear. And lastly, I made her wings bigger, as in some of the renders you can hardly even see them at all, as well as making them more vampire-esque, I guess, by making them curve more into her than the flat dragon wings she has now. Much like with my design of Knuckles in the last video, if there could only be one they could fix out of the 4 this time, Rouge would be the one I want them to fix the most. She's just been whittled down to the eye candy. Like, remember when she had an actual personality in Sonic Adventure 2 and Heroes? Because I sure as hell don't. I feel like this design will help bring her back to what she used to be. Now we move on to the man who single-handedly pissed on the moon, Dr. Eggman. Before I go into the design I did, I feel like I should say this first. Dr. Eggman is probably the best model out of the whole cast they have right now. Like, this is probably the only model that I wouldn't mind staying the same because they actually somewhat use it properly. Do I have my nitpicks with it? Sure, and I'll discuss those in a bit, but overall, this is the best and most utilized design they have in the games right now. For one, they actually animate his eyebrows. My god. He's the only character that emotes properly, and it's probably because they were forced to. Since he wears glasses all the time, you can't see his eyes at all. So I feel like they only animated his eyebrows was because he doesn't have eyelids, unlike the rest of the characters. So they actually had to animate the things that make him expressive. Go figure. Is it the best? No, I wish it was animated with a little more exaggeration, but I can actually tell how he's feeling. Now onto my little gripes. I do wish his mustache was bigger and more unkempt, to lean more towards him being a mad scientist. I also would like his mustache to have a tint of orange to it, rather than it just being straight brown. I don't like how reflective his jacket is. I wish it was more of a cloth material. I tried to show that off with giving him a darker jacket. I also gave him a bigger mouth when he grins, as I feel like it's a big part of his character. I mean, he was based on Teddy Roosevelt with his big old chompers. And lastly, even though I don't show this in my design, I'd want his suit to kind of be like Inspector Gadget, to where it has all these secret compartments and hidden tech. The closest we've seen something like this in the games is in Frontiers, where he uses his gold square thing as a log tracker. Like, wouldn't it be cool if each of those could have something in them, like a homing tracker, like we see in the movie, or heck, just even give him the gloves from there. Just some tech that's incorporated into his base design, so he's always prepared for certain situations when he's out of his mechs. But other than that, I wouldn't change that much, as I already love the design we have for him now. But I still wanted to draw him, as so many of you requested it, and I really like how it came out. Last up, we got the Doctor's greatest creation, Metal Sonic. To start off, I added some vents in his head, as well as some seams that break his head into sections. I feel like this does a better job at making him look a little more mechanical without overcomplicating him too much. I made his ears thicker, as I'm just not a fan of how they usually look. Looks like little shovels, they just stuck into his head. His limb proportions are closer to what we've established with the other characters. I made him a darker and more vibrant shade of blue, as well as giving him a little tail on the back. I honestly have no idea why they didn't give him one in the first place. And lastly, I made I don't know what they're actually called, but the things in between his feet into actual tires. I did this because I thought it would be a cool concept if his feet can transform into wheels that he can then skate around while he's racing or fighting Sonic. And I thought it would make more sense for him to do that instead of flying, because, you know, he's meant to be Sonic's equal. So the fact that he doesn't really run or have a form of running just seemed odd to me. So yeah, that's Metal Sonic. I just wanted him to feel more robotic rather than a toy. I love his original design. I think it's honestly one of the greatest in the franchise. But his 3D model, I don't know, just something about it screams Fisher-Price to me. Maybe it's his smooth dome combined with how his ears look, but I don't know. I just think this does a way better job of communicating that he's a robot. So there you go. Another 4 characters that we can add to the lineup.
Oh no! Damn! Get a load of this!
You can see that Metal Sonic and Shadow are the same height as Sonic, which is a given. Rouge's ears reach Knuckles' height, but her head is just above Amy's. And of course, Eggman just towers over all of them. Again, it's so much fun doing this. I can't wait to do more characters in the future. I mean, with the Sonic cast I got, Jesus! Well, let's just say the Sonic cast gives me a lot of content to put out. I already have an idea of who I'm going to redesign at the next part, but I'd still love to see who you all would want to see me tackle. I'd also love to hear what you would do different if given the opportunity to redesign these characters, if you would redesign them at all. With all that said, thank you so much for watching the video. I'm Danspex, and I'll catch you later. Have a good one.